Hey guys, welcome to the new episode of the Andy Social Podcast. And once you're done here, make sure to head over to Goat King Riders Club,
where we never let grammar get in the way of a good story.
Good yarn.
Yarn? Story? Fuck, doesn't matter, does it?
Well, it does when we're doing the promo for it.
Oh well, that's what they're getting.
Also, come and check us out on YouTube for full video versions. Enjoy the show.
G'day Andy Socialites, it's Jeremy Big Jez Turner here. I'm just coming in with a quick plug for me mate Andy because he's running a fucking sweet deal over at his Patreon account at the moment. So I've been a member of it for a few months now. It's always been a pretty entertaining little listen on a Tuesday morning, I think it is. He does a heap of shitty karaoke. He'll tell us a whole bunch of things about random shit that he's researched in the last week. He'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in the world of the man himself, Andy Dowling. My personal favourite part is his mission to offset his impending alcoholism with getting his steps up on his iPhone. It's just all round good fucking fun. In any case, you can join for as little as $1 a month. Of course, that $1 a month is a slap in the face tier, so if you're feeling even halfway flush, you should probably go for the $5 jobby, and in return you get a whole heap of sweet extra content, and he gets to keep doing his thing, and then maybe at some point in the next fucking decade, we'll get another Lord album. And in any case, like $5 is pretty much nothing. If you live in Sydney, or even worse, if you live in fucking Melbourne, $5 is somewhere between a third and half of a schooner in most pubs. So it's a pretty sweet deal, and it goes a long way to help Andy keep pumping out the good shit we all like. Anyway, thanks for listening. Enjoy the podcast. All right.
Hey, episode 265 of the Andy Social Podcast is here, and my guest for this episode is Jim Gray of, get ready for it, Caligula's Horse. Caligula's Horse. You know, your mate Andy sucks at pronouncing things, and this is the worst band title for me to try and pronounce. Luckily, the guys have nicknamed the band Seahorse, and that just takes a lot of pressure off me. But nonetheless, Caligula's Horse is the band. Jim Gray is the guest. Fantastic chat. I've known Jim for a long, long time, and we talk a little bit about that in this episode, but it's been years since we've actually caught up in any particular way. So a great chat, gets a bit deep in places, just the way I like it, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. Go to caligulas'shorse.com. They're on the socials. I'm going to have everything in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. But enough crapping on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Jim Gray.
But yeah, it's got to be 15 years at least.
It's a long time, and I kind of feel like I was, usually when I do these podcasts, I write down a few notes, not so much to do like a Q&A sort of thing, but just to jog my memory and sort of fresh, get everything fresh in my mind. And I realised that sort of coming into this, that this is probably just going to be us catching up for lost time, and me probably just asking you a bunch of dumb questions that you probably really have talked about at length over the years, and really I think a lot of this is me putting up my hand saying I have been paying attention a little bit, but probably not to the extent that a lot of other people have, because I think we've just all been off doing our own thing. So for me, I'm sort of, doing a bit of online stalking and looking like band stuff and all that stuff, and I'm like, man, like a lot's happened. Yeah,
too much, arguably. But no, it makes sense. I love now that phenomenon where we've got mates from way back or school colleagues and whatever. I wanted to say friends there, but I don't know if that's the case. But people from school and whatever, and you sort of like you're keeping tabs on their life, but you don't know shit about them personally or anything like that. But it's just bizarre because we've got to be one of the first sort of generations who have access to that kind of thing. Like a school reunion, for example, something like that would be pretty arbitrary at this point, because it's kind of, you're not going to be walking up to somebody and go, man, I'd love to find out about your life. You just be like, yeah, so how's your child whose name I know? It's
it's weird.
Weird.
Very weird. I think also there's an obsession that I think a lot of people have to really look and investigate and stalk and see what everybody's doing, because it's a bit of a comparison test. It's like, oh well, how successful have I been versus the person that I hated in high school, or the person who appeared to be successful in high school that was one of the cool kids, and now I'm trying to play catch up, and how does my life size up against that person? And I think the old high school reunion's a bit different these days. I don't know. I don't even know if they still happen. I had my 10-year one, quite some time ago now, and I didn't go.
10 years ago.
Yeah, that's it. And I actually probably close to bang on that. Yeah, and I didn't go, but we were probably sort of at the tail end of that transition where we the internet was around, but there wasn't social media and things like that. So there was still a little bit of a fascination of people quickly catching up to try and understand what everybody's doing. But yeah, there's I don't know, there'd be zero appeal really.
Yeah, I mean, other than just kind of like physically reconnecting with someone, I have this whole thing where, as I get older, which I am by the minute, you kind of realize that how did I put this? It was nice. Yeah, that's right. Like love is shared experience, more than anything else. Like, you spend more time with people, and the more you have like kind of a love connection with them, like your close mates and whatever. But even with something like school, for example, like at a school reunion, like you have the shared experience of like a really relatively traumatic time, like everyone kind of coming of age and whatever. And so I don't know, I would enjoy that, I think. Despite knowing kind of where everyone's at, it'd be nice to kind of go and just like, I can see you, and that's nice.
Yeah, I guess there's a bit of that reminiscing as well, sort of reflecting back, and there'll be a lot of memories that you hold that other people don't, and vice versa. So there'll be things that people share, and you go, oh fuck, I completely wiped that from my memory, and maybe
thanks
for good reason.
A sharp reminder.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I guess there's some value there, but it's a weird one. I mean, for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I didn't really sort of, using that term, come of age until probably at the end of high school and the first year out of high school, where I kept in contact with a few friends, and I kind of still do, but really, I mean, I don't have any very close bonds with people from my school years, and those close bonds that I've formed have been outside of school. So for me now, it would be I don't know. I mean, maybe there could be value in a bit of reminiscing and sort of thinking about that time. But I think for me, I sort of moved on and sort of cut a lot of those ties, because life post school was just so much more appealing and enriching and fulfilling for me. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the same for you, or whether you still hold a lot of close connections or links with that time.
Well, I guess that's kind of the irony, isn't it? That like the people that you are closest to, you sort of keep in touch with. Like I've got a couple of my closest mates who are obviously from school, and I've been I got a close mate, Jamie, who I've known since I was 9. We were like best mates for Jesus Christ. How many years is that? Like 20, 25? 25 years or something like that. Yeah, it's a long time, and so now I've been best mates with him since that day. So it's not like, it's not like I'd be going to this reunion going like, oh, hey, dude, I didn't see you last week. You're not the, pseudo uncle to my daughter. Like, you're already sort of close enough to these people. So yeah, it might even be a relic of a former time, not even from the purpose of social media or whatever, but like just people's lives being of a different nature previously. So there was more kind of impetus to focus on what happened in school and what those experiences were. Maybe that was the peak of people's socialization and life. That's sad. That's a sad thing to think about, if that's true.
It is. Well, it probably is for a lot of people. I think, when you think about the traditional sort of path, or the stereotypical path that a lot of people take, it's, that's probably the heightened sort of time of stimulus. A lot of working yourself out. Where do you fit into the world? Experimenting with how you interact with other people around you, and as other people change at the same time, it's probably can be highly enriching or exciting or absolutely traumatic, depending on the personality type. But after that, it's, I mean, I'm overly stereotyping, and I think the stereotypes are starting to wash away over time. But you either go into formal education, extended education, or you hit the workforce and you get some stability, and you get a house, you get a family, get some kids, and then a very close close circle of people that you agree with and are like-minded, and then that's about it. And there's an element of comfort that's attached to it, and so the challenging stimulus of all that other stuff sort of washes away. So it's but mind you, I mean, there's a million exemptions or different pathways to that. But I think that's probably the case for a lot of people, where that was the pinnacle.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly, this is something that happened to me some years ago now. But and I don't know whether you get this as well if you're catching up with people, but random encounter with someone from my school, and they were sort of aware of what path I was on, all of this music nonsense, and they had gone down a far more traditional path of like, I've got my job, I've got my family, I've got all this, and they just assumed that I wasn't interested in that. They're like, you don't want to hear about that, man, like that's just boring or whatever, your life, etc. And so I have a real fascination with that, just because I've never had a real person job, like I've never had like a traditional kind of career thing at all. So I'm actually truly fascinated by that, because I've just been gallivanting around in my own juvenile adolescent fantasy for the last 20 years. So, who knows? Who knows what it's like?
Oh, it's similar to me, but it's also the opposite as well. If you flip it, like if I'm talking to somebody, I'm sometimes so self-conscious about the things that I do and get up to, and I think that if I start talking about it, I'm going to get passionate about it, because they're things I love, and I'm obsessed about them. And so I'm always worried about me talking too much and then them glazing over and going, oh, like, God, like, come on, like, let me talk, And so I always, like, for a lot of people out there, apart from sort of closer friends, and this fucking podcast, I mean, this is a different platform altogether.
Yeah, see, that's ironic. It's just like I find myself talking too much.
Yeah, here's this podcast I've been doing for 5 odd years. But I think I become a closed book with a lot of people, and I won't say too much. And I usually sit back and as ridiculous as it sounds to verbalise it, I've got a lot of sort of extrovert tendencies. Introvert. And I will just sit back and be very quiet and let other people talk, because I have a default thinking, well, I don't want to be selfish, and ultimately they're not going to really care too much about what I'm interested in, so why bother? And it's a very self-defeating sort of attitude to have, but it's something I've been trying to work on for quite a few years. So it's funny, because if you get two people like that coming together, then there's not going to be a lot of talking, because you're both so sensitive to each other that everyone's too scared to take the first step.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I mean, like I'm a fundamental extrovert, as I'm sure you remember. But at the same time, I kind of play the same approach when it comes to new people, particularly new people that like, if I'm on tour, or I want to be on tour, if I'm on tour or anything like that, meeting people where you get that thing that you take for granted, where someone, you're talking to someone who's aware of who you are, you have that for free. When I'm meeting new people, particularly because, like, my daughter's at school now, and I'm meeting other parents and everything like that, I kind of play my cards pretty close to my chest with that. I don't really mention the band or what I do at all. And that's not from any delusion that we're like massive or anything like that. But it's, it is a different thing that we do, and I've released albums and things that people think are serious things. So it's like I try to kind of not drop that first thing, and people gradually find out over time. And by that stage, they know me, so that it's not like such a weird thing after that. But yeah, I always feel like if I came in, g'day, I'm Enora's dad. Good to meet you. Like, by the way, I'm off on tour next week, and I am very cool. Thanks very much. Just
you should try that. Just
feels
to see
like
how
I'm kind of flex on people. Yeah. Hey man, I'm the cool guy. What's up? Good to meet you.
But I'm sure you, just like me, have bumped into a lot of people that take that approach when they're introducing themselves and talking. Of meeting people for the first time and trying to build rapport. And I think some people are sometimes so ultimately self-conscious and sort of lacking self-esteem that they're trying to validate their position and their own personality, like their own sort of image in front of you to try and sort of size themselves up and go, hey, I'm somebody you should be talking to. I'm important too. So, and they'll go through their credentials in the first couple of sentences of talking, and you sort of go, oh, okay, all right, well, this we're going to take a different path here in conversation. But it's a weird thing. And it's an identity thing as well, which I've always struggled with over the years about how many eggs do I put in the basket of the musician identity, and the husband, or the old traditional employee in a company, or now, like in recent times, the podcaster, or just the guy on the internet, or whatever it might be. It's always a bit of a mental hurdle to jump over to try and work out, okay, well, who am I?
Yeah, I mean that's been a thing for me, like over the last however many years. And particularly the last year, just going, I have all of my eggs in that basket. Like my entire personality, my identity is entirely wrapped up in Jim from Caligula's Horse. Like I'm a singer. It's what I do. I release albums. I tour. Like that's been my entire thing. And so when like the pandemic happened and everything sort of shut down, I was. I lost that identity entirely. Like it kind of disappeared from me, and I've had a super, super rough year with that because I've been trying to kind of rebuild and go, all right, well, if this doesn't work out, if all the stuff I've worked for is gone and we can't tour or we can't keep doing this, who am I? And the answer is pretty much nothing from my internal point of view. I know I've got more things, family is here and stuff, but when you've identified yourself in a certain way for that length of time, and then that sort of gets dropped out from underneath you, it sort of leaves you floundering in terms of self-belief. So, well, that was fun.
Here, Jim, lie down on this chair and tell me your thoughts. But I think it's probably a bit different. I mean, I shouldn't say a bit different because I'm not trying to make you out to be unique and special in the grand scheme of things. But I think you guys have had some success over the years, and you've done a lot of touring, and you have had those albums that have hit charts, and I think when you compare to a lot of other Australian bands in a certain sort of, if you're sort of looking at it from different levels from starting out to the the upper realms of mainstream success, I mean, you guys have done pretty well, and so I think you've sort of over the years have reinforced that image and that identity because it's been validated. It's been validated along the way to say you are that person and you're doing great things, and here's the fruits of those efforts that you've been putting in for so long, and you can see the path is continuing to go in a positive direction up until 12 months ago. So I can sort of appreciate that, whereas maybe some other people out there who might have been a musician have probably had to go through this maybe a little bit earlier for different reasons, where bands fizzle out, or maybe the popularity hasn't kicked in, or maybe they've hit their 30s. When you hit that 30 mark, I've spoken about this quite a bit. I'm getting into the second half of my 30s now, but when you hit 30, for a lot of people, it's that one of those first crises that you have where you sort of go,
yeah,
what am I doing with my life? Is this the right thing? Should I be doing other things? Should I have a house? Should I have a job? Should I be doing, and so that's the comparisons that kick in. So I don't know. I mean, I mean, for me, of course, this is me analyzing you from the outside.
From me on my couch, yeah.
From you on your couch. But I mean, I just look at it and go, you've had good reason to put your eggs in one basket to an extent, and I feel for you, especially over the last year, and no doubt there's a lot of people that are in the same boat who have put so much into touring and music and getting yourself out there and building that identity just out of sheer passion, but also seeing the fruits of it. So I get it to an extent without being in your shoes.
There's also the factor that, and this is something that I think a lot of listeners of music and kind of fans don't quite grasp, is just how tenuous the financial position of bands they think are successful is. I mean, I know, you're more than aware of this, and pretty much anyone who's been in a touring band knows this stuff, that it's like anytime you get on the road, there's a risk, and you're trying to get as much out of it as you can to get to that break-even point. And even just like a drop in momentum like this, and unfortunately for us, it was timed around the release of the album as well, the impact that has on our ability to kind of move forward and actually make it feasible financially to continue doing this is pretty significant. So it's, you know, it obviously goes beyond all of the personal, which is obviously hugely significant as well. But just like you start asking the questions, it's just like, well, how do we come back from this? You know, like what's the next step in terms of making the business side of the band functional, you know, which is not fun to think about, really.
I guess if you look at it from a glass half full perspective, have there been things that you guys collectively, or even yourself, have been forced to have to think about that's actually been beneficial? Like just out of sheer restrictions of being able to sort of go through the normal flow of an album touring, that cycle, are there things that you're sort of looking at it now sort of going, well, we wouldn't have done this had this situation have happened?
Yeah, actually. I mean, Sam and I both, you know, we tossed up the idea of going, well, do we just start writing the next album? But, you know, because we were so kind of, not burnt out, but definitely kind of depleted by the writing process of Rise Radiant. Like, you know, normally, you know, an album is finished and it's out there, and then you tour and you kind of make memories with it and spend time on it and stuff and have all those worldly experiences and come back kind of refreshed to write. But going back to back and doing another one wasn't something that we were really ready to do. So both of us kind of went like, well, do you want to go and write some stuff on your own? And Sam's been experimenting and writing at home. I've sort of developed a little setup for myself at home, which I didn't have before, and toying around with ideas. And they may never come to kind of release level fruition, but it's been a really exciting experience being able to kind of just sit around at home and plug away solo, which is not really something I've done, at least in the 10 years of Seahorse. It's always been collaborative, but maybe even ever, you know, because even in the Arcane days, it was like a big collaborative kind of effort. There was really one track from Arcane that was entirely me, and that was it. So that's been a kind of cool change.
Has it been good Has it been good mentally for yourself just to sort of work through some of this shit in your head, that, you know, all the ups and downs?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's sort of culminated in me writing a lot sadder, darker material. Like the whole mission statement with Seahorse from the beginning was always like, you know, we're going to write some stuff that's ultimately uplifting, and even if it's got a darker kind of message or a darker tone, you know, we go with the bittersweet rather than the maudlin. You know, it's got to have like a you know, if you're talking about like being in a hole, there's always a discussion of the way out, musically speaking. You know, that's kind of what we've done. And like on my own, particularly right now, that's not where I'm at. It would feel disingenuous to sort of do that. So it's been a bit of a return to the kind of darker, sort of sadder sounds that you heard with Arcane and stuff too. So a bit of an outlet for that.
Well, I guess it's a somewhat healthy outlet to, you know, it's constructive as well. It's not just you sort of wallowing in your sorrow, staring at the wall. I don't want to just be alone with my thoughts. No one likes that. That's not a healthy place to be. No.
So alone with one's thoughts and a mini little friggin' guitar and keyboard, like that's the extension of that.
Oh man. Well, I guess going into this year, I mean, it's all a big unknown this year. I mean, I guess the thing that we all probably know deep down is that we're not really going to get out anywhere to really do a lot of touring. I think if anything, if we're lucky, we might be able to sort of get around the country a little bit. You know, if everything stays somewhat stable. But I mean, getting overseas that's a real wild card at the moment. But I mean, have you guys thought about it? Have you and Sam and the rest of the guys sort of spoken about sort of how you tackle this year, or is it more of a case of just sticking to what you guys are currently doing, just focusing on just some individual creative endeavors?
Well, we definitely want to get out touring again. Like one, because I feel like if we're talking about identity, like before, that's kind of what I've realized about myself, is that I'm more of a performer than a musician in my mind. Like being an entertainer, being on stage, kind of talking to crowds, performing, all of that is what I do best, you know, more so than sitting around and writing music. So personally, I want to get out as soon as we can. Australia looks sort of okay. And I guess, like, you know how long you have to do everything in advance to book international and national tours and stuff. So we're still kind of semi-optimistically booking shows and tours and things like that, knowing full well that in all likelihood they're not going to go ahead, but just sort of having to have them booked in case they do, you know, in case everyone gets vaccinated and things start looking better, as unlikely as that is. But, you know, we're probably not going to be back on the road probably at the earliest 2022, but it's definitely on our minds and it's definitely on the cards. It's just whether those cards fall the right way.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it's, you gotta have your cards on the table, your chips in to make sure that at least you're in the running for getting your spot, getting your dates, your venues and things like that, which means mentally, investing a little bit of commitment to the possibility that this is going to happen, which can be quite taxing. I mean, that's an exhausting thought, just to know that there's so much uncertainty, but you got to do it anyway, because if you don't, and then things get better, you've lost that spot, and so you're already 6-12 months or whatever, further down the track than you were before. So it's a tough one to have to sort of mentally sort of get your hands around.
Yeah, I feel like pretty much any muso, or like any working muso now, has to sort of maintain a level of reasonable pessimism, I guess. As not fun as that sounds, it's kind of like, you have to realistically look at what's going on and go, yeah, I mean, in all likelihood, it won't happen. But we got to lay it out there. I was about to say put the cards on the table again, but the thing is, I don't gamble. I don't.
Neither do I. I don't even know the terms.
What the rules are. It's like, yeah, we're throwing out all of these idioms like we know what we're talking about, and I feel like if I keep doing it, I'm going to embarrass myself at some stage.
Well, don't worry. I've been doing it for 5 years, mate. I've got no clue.
Brilliant.
I know a lot about nothing. And it's something about a lot of things that, I've so many times I've actually, not only have I said something about a subject or a topic that I've got no idea about, but I've actually got the saying completely backwards or incorrect as well. So, so people who've been listening are well and truly used to that. So don't stress about that. We can pretend that we know a lot about gambling. Although I don't want to really brag about that. I don't think it's a great a great thing to boast.
What does this do to your listenership? Do we have to put a warning now at the beginning?
No, and there's warnings all over it already. That's fine.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, good.
That's good.
Yeah.
I prefer to be a jack of all bullshit. It's like, it'd be great to be, a full sort of expert and stuff. That'd be nice. But for people with a short attention span, that's where I live. That's my thing.
That's me. That's me. I can't sit still. And I obsess over it. I fantasize about it because I see people that are absolute subject matter experts, and they've carved out a career or just a passion to do something at a very high level. But I can't do it. I can't sit still for a long period of time. My focus can't stay in the one spot for a long period of time. I've got to keep touching lots of different things all the time just to keep myself stimulated. And I guess it makes life exciting at times. Can also be really frustrating. So is that similar to you in a way?
No, totally. I can totally relate to that, especially because, I think it's part of why, my relationship with Sam Vallon is so good in terms of writing and also personally, just because of how different we are. Like he's just completed his PhD. Like he's Dr. Vallon now. And his expertise when it comes to music is just like, it's literally unparalleled in people that I know. But he's one of those people whose mind, it's not just that he's a super diligent, hardworking dude, which he is, but his mind kind of retains information in a way that I find amazing. Like he'll read stuff and then know that stuff. This is making me sound really dumb. This is how like you read stuff and then you know stuff? Yeah, that's called learning, dickhead. But no, I mean he can just retain written stuff. Like I find it very difficult to read. Like I'm very scattered in that way, and I have to kind of voice things to be able to learn them, kind of thing. Like I'll make a whole stack of notes and then I'll tell somebody else about it. Like if I can't, walk around the house gibbering about it to my wife, then it's not going to stick, So she kind of gets tired of hearing minutia from me. If I wanted, like when I was studying and stuff, that was basically how it came together. But yeah, I've never been able to sort of function in that way, which is why it's good to have someone like Sam to work with, because he's such an adult and runs the show, keeps things on track.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I've got to surround myself with really stable, responsible, reliable people that have got some, earthly qualities, earthly personalities, and just somebody who can keep me on track and bring me back to earth. Because I don't know if it's the same with you, but I'll have an idea, it'll come out of nowhere, and I'll just obsess on it, and it'll become intoxicating. And it's the most ridiculous idea. It's stupid. It's not viable. It's not sustainable, but it's become my world. And mind you, in probably a day's time or something like that, it's completely gone. But for that day, somebody's going to cop it. You know, somebody in my inner circle, and they're going to cop the wrath from me. And I end up, luckily in most cases, that person will bring me back to earth and go through it methodically and go, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about it. And I'll go, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And then I'll be like, okay, no worries.
No, I haven't. I haven't thought about those things. Thanks. It's just having adult supervision. That's basically what it is. So. Like, surrounded by full-time carers. And that's good. It's useful. But yeah, when it comes to, like, it's actually funny, like, comparing myself and Sam, like, it's kind of like, I think I've said it before, it's like Kirk and Spock in a way, where it's like, you know, like the team works together really well. And he sees big picture stuff, and I see kind of the immediate, and it kind of balances itself out a little bit. But, you know, it's kind of why it's hard for me to kind of sit at home and produce something full and complete, because, you know, I have like tons of ideas and I'll lay them all down, but then weaving them together into something is something that Sam is so artful at, and so well practiced at as well. So the interesting thing about being around someone like that is that, you know, they make you better regardless. Like someone like Sam touches the lives of everyone around him. Like, you know, if you spend enough time with him, you kind of driven and inspired to be better and to dedicate yourself the way he does. But I've come to accept that there's only a certain extent to which I can actually do that that's within my capability. But it's still like, he just makes you better. That's who he is.
Well, I think it's the key. I think it's key even for somebody like him. No doubt he will have people that he, you know, from a comparison point of view, will lean on, or have some stability or a rock that keeps him in check as well, and or inspires and motivates him to continuously want to do better. And I think that's where a lot of people, and I've done it in the past as well over the years, you know, you let yourself down because you invest too much time in maintaining or creating relationships with people that you don't see eye to eye with, or maybe are not, or only surface level relationships that don't have a lot of substance attached to it. And so you're only really getting out what you put in or what you're receiving from that other person in that relationship. So no doubt, you know, he's got something like that keeps him fired up and moving as well. But I think that's key. I think it's this constant search to ensure that you've got a really solid support network of great people around you.
Yeah, the whole rising tide lifting all ships, etc. Yeah. I wonder if that exhausting, you know, surrounding yourself with people that don't necessarily, I don't know, they don't spark joy, as Marie Kondo might say. God, that's annoying, by the way. I find that such a, and this is going to sound really shitty, but I find that such a non-parent thing to say. You know, it's just like, you know, you've got to get rid of the stuff in your house that doesn't spark joy, you know. And it's just kind of like, well, you know, this half-broken doll that has been sitting unattended in the play area for the last 6 months, if asked, my daughter will definitely say it sparks joy, and there's no getting rid of any of that. So it's, you know, by all means, throw out all that stuff and simplify your life. But it's a very non-parent thing to say.
I think it is.
But I reckon the modern version of that kind of surrounding yourself, etc., that I was saying before, is probably like the same as trying to create that, I don't know, Instagram perfect life image as well. Like you're trying to put that out and putting all of your energy into appearing a certain way, and then it just kind of hollows you out. And I even find that with PR, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, putting that image of yourself out and whatever else. And, you know, I've sort of cultivated an image for myself as someone that's positive and wants to put positive stuff out there and, you know, share stories even when they're negative with a positive touch and getting people through stuff. And that weighs on me sometimes. Like I look at social media and I just feel like I have nothing to say that suits that image, and I just kind of have to walk away from it for a while, and it's freaking exhausting.
It's tough. I had a little bit of a moment yesterday where I was just thinking about all the different things I've got my fingers in, you know, little projects and little things I love, and it's just a little bit overwhelming. And I was just sort of on the pessimistic side of things, and I was just sort of looking around and I thought, my initial thing, which sounds so weird, but it's the way we live and function these days. But I kind of want to just get a little bit out of it onto social media. I wanted to post something. I wanted to just sort of find an outlet when I should have just gone for a jog around the streets or whatever and gone for a walk or whatever. But I had this instinct where I wanted to put something out, but I thought there's nothing I can put out here that is of value or is positive or constructive or anything like that. I'm just going to come across as somebody who's having a whinge, even though that's a completely natural thing for somebody to do, but it's going to reflect poorly on me. And ultimately, what do I actually want out of this? Like, what do I want people to message me and ask me if I'm okay? And I'm thinking, well, no, I don't. And so I had to go through this whole thought process in my head because I'm similar to you. I'm always trying to just be silly on social media, keep it lighthearted, some fun stuff, and just I'm not there to be a sook or a whinger or anything like that, or even just to express some of the the darker moments that you have along the way. And so, but you do find yourself sort of stopped, and you go, I'm kind of feeling a little bit suffocated at the moment because how do I get this out? How do I try and get this out of my system and express it to somebody? And so a lot of the time it's a case, well, for me anyway, I just go for a walk or go for a jog, and it tends to sort of at least wash some of it out and keeps me going. But it's a weird thing because I just look at other people and I watch how other people choose to use social media, and there's great examples and there's some pretty poor examples as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of people putting their relationship problems and details up on Facebook or social media. It's like, I don't remember being invited to this meeting. I don't really need to be here for this tiff between you and what you're doing. But no, I agree. I think group chats have actually been my outlet for that. Like having group chats with the family and stuff. I'm not putting photos of my daughter up on social media and stuff like that. I'm not. There's a handful of them up there, but I don't really want to sort of be putting her out there like that. So all of that goes to family, or if I got a problem, I'm texting my mates about it, whatever. I've had a couple of times. I mean, like recently I went in for a procedure I think I messaged you about that, on my vocal cords, and that was a pretty big deal. So I put a little story about being sort of a big deal, like career-wise, and something that fans might want to know about, that kind of thing. I sort of put it out there, and I got a huge amount of support back, and some of it was really helpful, mostly from friends of mine that are singers or vocal coaches or whatever, because they kind of understood the mental aspect of it more than the physical. Just kind of like, I hope you're feeling okay. But there were a lot of stuff from fans or whatever, and I greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate the effort that they go into, but sometimes it was stuff that just sort of added more pressure on me, just kind of like, the world needs your voice, man. Like, I'm a huge fan, and like, I don't know what I'd do without your music, kind of thing. And it's just like, well, thanks, man. I'll do my best. I'll try and come back. And you don't know how precious this is to me, so thanks for the extra pressure. And even when it's such a volume of support like that, again, it should be a lovely thing, and it is. But to me, it starts to feel, I don't know, just because of my poor sort of self-esteem and self-image and whatever, it starts to feel disingenuous after a while. Like, you get so much love and so much support that I'm looking at those messages going like, yeah, I'm not worth any of this. It's like the opposite of where I should be at that. But that's one of those sort of, if we were in the same position 15 years ago or before all of this was available, then I wouldn't have that unique experience of too much love making me feel bad. So it's kind of a unique 2021 thing.
Yeah, I think I can appreciate that. It's a case of, when those things happen, or like even for me, like I get a positive message from somebody about something, and I'll just, my default self-talk, which, I'm always battling to try and improve, but the default is always, you don't really know me. Like, if you really knew me, you would know how much of a lazy sack of shit I am, how much of a whinger I am, how much of a pessimistic person I am, how much of a slob I am, or some of the thoughts that I have, and blah, 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 or just how much of a shit friend I can be at times, or self-absorbed, whatever negative things I can throw on top of myself. And that, and over the years I've gotten better with reducing the amount of time that messaging kicks in straight away. because I've sort of realised that I think it's never going to go away. I think that's just it's a default mechanism and maybe a little bit of protection for myself. But the amount of time that sort of sits there and stays front of mind is reducing, and so that makes it a little bit more manageable. But there's an element of trust there where I don't trust people to think that it's either coming from a genuine place, which is really unfair on that other person, but also that they're only seeing a very sort of, you know, one-dimensional aspect of me and not seeing the full picture. And so it's just mental games that you're playing with yourself all the time.
I wonder how much of that comes from the Australian cultural kind of tall poppy stuff that we do. Like I try to make it as clear as possible to people the level to which I am a dickhead, and that's sort of part of the whole thing. You know, that when, say, someone is being, you know, throwing some obsequious praise at you, like, where, you know, if you're on tour or you're meeting someone and they're flipping out or anything like that, and you kind of, you know, I don't just think it, I kind of say, like, you know, like, oh, you don't know, like, we're all just a pack of dickheads hanging out, rock music and blah, blah, blah. You know, and it's like, that's a very Australian kind of thing to do, where you kind of want to cut yourself down and not appear to be your own ass in any way. And I think that for people who, like, I don't know about yourself, but certainly myself being non-neurotypical and kind of, you know, depression, bipolar, all of that kind of stuff, where you're really into the self-deprecation and the sort of natural practice, things like that, where you're in a delusion about yourself, you know, that can, you can take that Australian thing and just go the next level of not just going like, oh yeah, we're not that great, and go all the way to like, oh no, I'm a huge piece of shit. And it just kind of spirals downwards from there, you know. So I have a theory that, you know, we're sort of, as Aussie men, kind of step back a little by that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've crapped on about it quite a bit over the years, where it's just, I think it's held a lot of us back, where, you know, a lot of us could really reach not a full potential, but I think some potential. There are things that we actually care about and we're passionate about, but we're so scared to talk about it or express it, or even to show
appear passionate.
Yeah, to show some glimmer of excitement about something that we give a shit about, and to do that seems like, you know, such a, well, and this is a horrible thing to say, but, you know, it's so gay, man, like, you know, or, you know, the old sayings that used to get thrown around at school. And
oh man, the early 2000s were a time, weren't they? They really were.
They sure were. But I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you know, I mean, I was really self-conscious, you know, really like lacking of self-esteem. And so the way that I would sort of make friends, and I did a lot of moving when I was a kid, you know, lots of different places in Queensland before ending up back in Brizzy. And, you know, you come into a new school setting or a new group of kids or whatever, and, you know, you are the weakest link, you know, and you've got to find a way to get your foot in and build respect or some rapport with somebody. And that's a difficult thing. And you tend to lean into exactly what you said. You find a way to cut yourself down before they do it, and show that there's nothing here for those people to feel threatened by or to be intimidated by, because, hey, look at me, I'm a dickhead. Oh, what a sack of shit I am, blah, blah, blah. Ha, 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 make a joke out of it, be lighthearted about it. But basically you're creating that protection straight away. And I still do it. I still do it all the time. Like, even on the podcast over the years, I always, like, especially if I get like somebody who I'm really intimidated by or I really look up to, I'll premise with them before we even get started. I'll say, look, I'm going to ask you a bunch of dumb questions, really, really dumb questions, because I've got no idea. But that's just, it's not for them. It's purely for me. It's for me psychologically to create that protection where I'm creating my safe space, and
I've lowered expectations accordingly, you know.
Yeah, and
it's set myself up there.
Yeah, but I'm worried that not so much about the guest or the person I'm talking to, but I'm worried about the people listening thinking, look at this dead shit, or, you know, or this person's getting excited about something, but he said the word wrong, or he doesn't even know what that is. I can't believe he doesn't know it. And so I'm always putting things in place to try and create those safeguards for myself so I can be a dickhead.
Yeah, and get away with it. But I mean, there's a certain extent where obviously it's healthy to do that, to be self-critical to a reasonable extent, just purely because, and this is no offense to Americans, but I think the last thing that I would want to be or want to have is that total over-the-top self-praise that is so prevalent in, say, American musicians and artists and stuff, and even sports people, that attitude of, I'm one of the greats, I'm going to do this thing. Like I would never carry that with me. So, I mean, obviously there's a healthy level to which one can do this, but, we take it to extremes. It's like a thing, like you're meeting someone new and you kind of, I'm a musician and progressive metal, we write, progressive metal concept with 4 chapters about artists and stuff. And I know it's lame, but that's what I'm into, kind of really downplaying, despite how much you love it. It's like, I'm really into Dungeons and Dragons. I know it's lame, but blah, blah, blah. It's such a weird thing to do. But it's protecting yourself, I guess. It is.
I mean, you constantly worry that other person's going to come back and say that before you've got a chance to say it. And I guess, I'm sure it's happened to you, but there's probably been instances, in your life, and certainly happened to me, where people have gotten in before you've had a chance and they've cut you down and they've told you, something that you're lame, or, your excitement or something like that is silly, or whatever it might be. And so you sort of, you're programmed in a particular way to get ahead of that and to manage that. And I mean, it's pretty sad, but I think also what you said with, the extremes of some of the North American culture in celebrity status and sports and music and all this sort of stuff, I guess there's positives to having elements of that in your personality and the way that you sort of, it gives you drive and motivation to be the best that you can. But I guess it comes down to balance, doesn't it? You got to have that balance of humility and modesty and trying to, I guess maybe a little bit of self-deprecation in a way that's a healthy dosage, just to keep yourself grounded, so you don't lose sight of I guess, your fulfillment and sort of your personal impact that you can have on the people around you.
And even from a songwriting perspective, one of the things you learn after doing it for years is being able to kind of look past your first idea and stop thinking of it as precious and sacrosanct, and being able to kind of really be self-critical in a very forward-thinking way. Like, not self-critical as in, I'm going to delete this idea because it's trash, but more looking at it and going like, all right, where are the strong points in this? Where are the weak points? What do I know is filler, and where can I take it? And I think lyrics for me are where I do that the most, where it's like, I can look at something and I'm kind of practiced at doing it, that like, I know what's a placeholder line. I know what's not what I need right there. It's kind of a process. And so I feel like if you had that attitude of, I am one of the greats, I am the best, look how great I am, that sort of would cripple your ability to be self-critical and prevent you from making better stuff. Like, I wonder what it's like to be in head. Like, I reckon it'd be a kaleidoscope, like a kaleidoscope of broken ideas. I worry about that guy a lot.
I wonder if, I always think of, the old bands from the 70s and the 80s that are still kicking around now, and you look at the classic albums, the ones that sort of, are held closely to people's hearts, and then you can see sort of that line where they've hit that level of success where they don't have to hustle anymore. The hunger's sort of reduced. And so then the creative output just changes. And, some bands are still able to maintain quality throughout their career, but a lot of bands had that dip, or they dip and just continue to sort of dip down because their reality is warped, they've or the priorities have changed, or the ego's been inflated to an extent where they don't need to think about themselves or do a lot of introspective sort of work on themselves to try and work out where they fit into the world. It's more of a case of, well, let's write some bangers and let's cash the checks in. So I think it's a very difficult thing when your environment changes and you've got a lot of praise and a lot of validation, where you're not forced to have to find that balance yourself and keep humble or find that humility.
Yeah, there's another way of looking at that as well, where actually there's a TED talk about this by David Byrne, singer from Talking Heads, and he sort of, his whole thing, and I'm going to paraphrase this badly, so people go, there I am doing it again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fascinating.
You'll be
well,
fine,
I'm
Jim.
going to
You'll be fine.
paraphrase this. Yeah, we're talking about music being written for the space that it's performed in. So he shows a photograph of a little punk venue, covered in stickers, sticky floors, little stage, small room. We've played 1,000 of those and they're great. As one of the earlier venues that Talking Heads played, and then played with that picture in the background, a sample of the music they wrote at the time to fill that space. And it was really reflective of that space. So I look at bands, something like Parkway Drive as an example, where it's not like the quality of their music has sort of plateaued or anything like that, because they're amazing. But they've gone from writing this, small venue music, this really super intense, heavy stuff, through to when they're playing stadium level shows, these big, big shows, the spectacle and size of their music has changed to fill that space. So, it's all, crowd sing-alongs and pyro and all of that stuff. And I think Muse is another great example. You can hear the point in their career where they're playing bigger venues because they've picked up in popularity so much. So they're not playing this really heavy riff-based stuff that you hear on stuff like Origin of Symmetry. Because they're playing these bigger venues, it becomes this more sprawling, big, large prog rock sounds, stadium sounds.
It'd be nice. I wouldn't mind having the task of going, okay, let's we've got to write some arena hits now. Oh, okay, no worries. Oh, damn.
I would love that as a challenge of you're about to play another, one of my favorite memories from one of our European tours was playing a venue called oh no, where's it gone? It was in Dusseldorf, the Tube, aptly named the Tube, and it's basically a corridor. It's like you kind of walk in and the bar is on the side and the bar takes up half the width of the room. And then you walk past the bar and that room opens out. There is no side or backstage entrance to the stage. It's just walls and you have to exit through the crowd to get out of the venue. It is like tiny sticky punk hole. And it just a weird show to play, but I have such fond memories of it because of that. But it'd be so great if you knew you were going to play a venue like that and decided to try and write a bunch of stadium-size hits just to play in a venue that size and just see how it goes down. See how it falls flat on its face in front of 30 people.
Well, I've seen glimmers of this, especially, living in Australia where maybe 15, 20 years ago when we didn't get as many shows as we used to. I mean, we're getting none at the moment, but prior to COVID, you would have bands, metal bands that would have really big followings in, say, South America or in Europe, maybe lesser to an extent in North America. And they've written, these big hits where it complements these size rooms with these big crowds where there's a lot of energy back and forth. And they come to play the Indie Temple in Fortitude Valley, and that's
a deep cut. Jesus Christ!
I thought you'd like that. And
oh man,
and 70 payers, and you're standing there going, "This is weird," because you're used to seeing these people on DVDs or videos or whatever, playing these massive shows, and for them, they're obviously approaching. I mean, bands approach this very differently depending on the band and the personalities, but. I remember seeing Ed Guy, big power metal band from Germany, and they're a big following, and they played at the Indie Temple, and they got I would be lucky if they got more than 100 payers, maybe, and very low ceiling, very dingy underground venue. Great memories of this place going there, but as a punter, but they got up on stage and they could see what was going on. And they played like they were playing in front of 10,000 people. And it was weird. It was weird in a way that it was just I knew, at least from my point of view, I knew what they were trying to do. And so there was a little bit of respect for that. They want to put on the show regardless of, people have come, so they've got to put on a show regardless. But there's a lot of times where they're trying to get, a bit of sing-along happening and things like that, and you've got and especially a bunch of Aussies that probably have. I think
that's tough.
It was a Thursday night as well, so most people had to drive home or whatever, so they're not juiced up, and it was just the dynamic wasn't there, the energy wasn't there, but they persevered and got through it. But I think that was an example where, you know, I think they still put on a good show, but the songs just didn't translate because they just didn't have that vibe there, and it was the size of the crowd and the size of the venue, and the songs just didn't quite work to the extent that they would have had it been, like, you know, a Brazilian crowd or somewhere in Germany or whatever it might be.
Totally.
So, yeah, it's an interesting
I feel
thing.
like it's tricky to navigate too, because, like, again, you want, like, for example, we want to give the Caligula's show to anyone. If we played a show to 10 people, like, we played a tiny little show in Slovakia one time, and that was a tough one, because I mumble and the language barrier is a thing. And when you make jokes that fall flat, all you can do is laugh at yourself, and that kind of makes it worse. But, you know, you're playing the show, so I want them to have the experience of the same experience that other people have when they see the show, but at the same time, you also have to kind of navigate it to, I'm going to play to this audience, you know, so there's a lot more room for chit-chat, usually, you know, like back and forth, joking with hecklers, downplaying the thing. You might even jump down and get in the crowd, that kind of stuff. Encouraging people to muck about. I remember there's a show in, I think it was Manchester, in this tiny little venue, and Ro from I Built the Sky, who was opening the show, just basically got everyone in the place to do a high five of death, because it was so funny, purely because there were, you know, between 50 and 100 payers, and, you know, not everyone had come through the door yet, and he's getting everyone to line up either side of the room and run through and high five each other. And that's an example of just kind of like, play to that crowd, you know, like, just take the piss a little bit, make sure that everyone knows that you know how small the crowd is, in a good way.
And it's probably, I mean, those things are great because they're the shows that people talk about years and years down the track. You know, they're the ones that people look back fondly and go, I was at that show. It was so unique. It was so unusual compared to what you would expect. And these were the things that made it unique. And it wasn't just a case of, oh, I saw this big band in a small venue and no one turned up, and it was, you know, it was a bit of a downer. It was a case of they made the most of it and made it more unique than what it was on its own. So, and I've seen bits and pieces of that over the years. Some bands do it really well and they adjust and they take it in their stride and try to just capture the moment as they can. And other bands, you can see their body language is just like, I am so dissatisfied with what I'm doing right now. I expect so much more, and I'm gonna grip my teeth and just make this difficult for all of us.
Yeah, let's make it. I feel like the best performers, you know, like people that are entertainers, the class acts are the ones that can navigate that so well. Like, even down to things going wrong. Like, one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen was at B-Prog, my friend, in Barcelona, festival in this beautiful location. Unfortunately, the festival's not around anymore, but it was in Poble Espanyol, which is like this square that was built as part of some expo. And all the buildings are an example of different eras Spanish architecture. And it was just good. It was one of those ones where you're standing on stage looking out at this thing going, what is my life? What's happening to me now? But I remember seeing Devin Townsend that day, and they were doing Ocean Machine in full. And I think they'd planned some encores and they never got around to being able to do them because they had, at the beginning of the show, something like a 15-minute delay where their gear crapped out.
Oh, I think I've seen this. I think it's on YouTube.
It is on YouTube, and it's phenomenal. Like, the laptop that they ran everything off just crashed. It just was not working. And he did 10 to 15 minutes of improvised stand-up and just, like, strumming on a guitar and, you know, trying to jokingly take requests from people to do, you know, whatever. He told one of the funniest jokes I've ever heard in my life, like a Canadian kind of anti-joke. And he's just like, how do you get 3 Canadians out of the pool? Oh, it's time to get out of the pool now, guys. Oh, you're right. No, we have been in a while. Like, and just dropping stupid shit like that for 10 to 15 minutes. And at no point did I feel any awkwardness. At no point did I go, ooh. You know, I felt empathy, obviously, like, as a performer, you know what it's like and how 30 seconds of things going wrong on stage feels like 5 full minutes and how crushing that is. So I felt empathy at that stage, but I never felt cringe. And that's an entertainer. Like, that's a guy who can just, like, no matter what is happening, he's got him. He's got the crowd and he's keeping the show going.
It's definitely a great lesson for a lot of people, especially, you got to be resilient being a musician anyway. I mean, as you alluded to earlier, I mean, we've all played those types of venues or those types of shows, and you walk into a place and go, oh, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And or you're getting on stage and maybe you haven't had a chance to look out into the crowd, and then maybe the curtains open, then you look out and go, oh, okay, maybe not as full as I thought, or whatever it might be. And it's like I've got to mentally adjust to make sure that I'm not demonstrating any disappointment or any negative feelings about what my surprise, and so. And I think as a music fan, I've seen horrible examples and great examples of people making the most of it. But I think it's a thing that we all have to be resilient. I think it's a mandatory thing when you're a musician, especially a touring one. And I think that I'm so glad that you said it earlier, because I don't think a lot of people will acknowledge it about being an entertainer, being a performer, because I think people sort of look at that as a very shallow sort of aspect to it. I think when people say I'm a musician, it's like I'm an artist, I'm somebody, I'm a creative, and I dig deep into my soul and I express it out, to the world, and it's up for
I manifest the intangible, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and so for somebody to say I'm a performer or an entertainer, or I need an element of that as a musician, a lot of people shy away from it because it sounds so wanky or superficial. But I've always said it. Ultimately, you're creating a scenario where you're advertising an event, people are paying money to see you, it's a transaction, and it's not just for you to be self-absorbed and talk about, or perform your creative works. It's a case of putting on an event and performing and whatever that is to complement, your music or your art or whatever. You've got to do it. But it's a bit of prancing, it's a bit of crowd work, it's a bit of theatrics, and maybe if you're
and it is a practice thing too. Like I remember being so green. Like you would have seen probably some of my earlier shows, like from the Ozprog days, like If I Can, whatever, all those tiny ones. And it's just like being so green and on stage and wanting to put on the best show that you can, but not really even subconsciously knowing what it is that makes a good show, or even how to do that, and particularly to overcome nerves and to create that as well. And now after, you play hundreds of shows over the years, and it's really second nature to do that. But having to draw it out of yourself for a small crowd, that's where the real practiced kind of artistry of being an entertainer comes from. But putting an entertaining show onto a large audience is the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
If this is what you do, but like at those smaller crowds, being able to work those smaller crowds, that's where it takes all the practice and all the skill set, I guess.
Well,
what do you reckon the easiest crowds are in the world?
As in a location or just the type of crowd?
Well, location, like what culture in the world has the easiest crowds?
Well, it's a difficult one, because I think as different as they can be, they're also quite similar in a way. I think you ultimately need to put the same ingredients together to be able to get a response from people. I mean, I've never played South America. That's one of the places that is a bucket list for me. I'd love to get there one day. And so the stereotype, or what you see or what's portrayed, is that it's almost like you walk in there and you could just fart and they'll go off. They'll love it. They'll love it. You can do no wrong. And I'm sure the reality is very different, but that seems to be a place where stereotypically it seems that the crowd would be some of the best crowds as far as getting that energy.
Those are going to be mine for sure.
And maybe some European festivals where people are in party mode. It's summer, good weather, and maybe
we're just here to listen to some good music and have a good time.
Maybe that works. But have you ever played Japan?
No, I would love to. That's on my bucket list.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So we've done a bit over there, and that's a different psychological hurdle to jump over, because they are fantastic. They are so loyal. They'll come out. They'll appreciate what you do. You don't have to put a lot of work in to get their affection. You've got to maintain it. The maintaining part's the difficult part, because once you build that connection, they want that loyalty back, and so it becomes a long-lasting relationship. And there's some good parts to that. The difficult thing though is the performance on stage and the interaction between yourself and the crowd, because what tends to happen, and just due to their culture, is that they're so respectful, is that when you finish a song, it's dead silent. There's nothing going on. And because they don't want to interrupt you, they're expecting you to talk, or if you want to talk, or if anything's going to happen, they don't want to interrupt you. They don't want to make any noise, so they're just quiet and they're looking at you. You know, you got a crowd of a couple hundred people or whatever, and they're just looking at you, and it's like, wow, this is awkward and intimidating.
and you're in your own head going like, they hate it.
They
hate me personally.
Oh, the first time was shocking, you know, and then of course you've got the language barrier, and so, you know, you go to talk and they can't understand what you're saying. And so they sort of might smile at you or maybe a little chuckle or something like that, but you can tell it's the chuckle of, I don't actually know what you're saying, but I'm trying to be polite here. And they're like, oh my God.
I appreciate the effort that you're going to.
Yeah. And so what we learned, and we got better over the years, is that two things we do now, and it's very superficial. One of them is that we will yell and scream and get the theatrics going in between the songs. So we'll yell out Tokyo or Osaka. Are you ready to rock? Things that are so stereotypical, like gross, you know, old school rock star things. But they're feeding off the energy, and then they'll respond and they'll cheer and whatever. And they're not too worried about the talking or the dialogue back and forth. They can understand enough to understand that we're trying to work them, and they'll give that back. The other thing that does work is an attempt to speak Japanese. They fucking love it. They love it. So, and you could mess it up, you could completely butcher it, and they will laugh and they will clap and they'll show a lot of affection. But I try to drip feed that rather than doing it all the time, because it does lose its appeal very quickly. But it's a weird thing, because we had to sort of learn. It's almost like going back to the first shows you would ever do as a local band or whatever, and you've got your 30 people or 20 people, and you know, half of them are your mates or whatever, and you finish playing the show and you can just hear, like, you know, a glass in the back of the room or something like that, or somebody coughing, or somebody having a conversation in the corner of the room, and you're like, are we here? Like, do you guys know we're here? Like, what do we need to do to keep you guys engaged? You know, so
my favorite thing is the local gig cheer. Like, and I'm going to move my phone away from my head to try and capture the space.
Yeah, right.
But it's like it's this single clap. It's like this. Woo! Yeah. and that's basically it. I love that. And there's actually one of my favorite things is there's footage of Tool playing in like '92 or something at this tiny club. I think it's in LA. And there's one of those, you know, it's like they play Sober or something, one of the big hits, and it ends and there's a dude doing that, woo, yeah. You know, it's kind of, it's great to see. You love to see it.
I've seen a photo of Tool, and it might be around the same time, and it keeps floating around the internet every once in a while, gets a bit of traction. And they're playing some dingy club show in LA, and is it Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine? He's in the front row hanging over the stage, because there's no barrier. It's like tiny club. And he just looks like a pimply little teen, and he's just there getting into it. And there might be somebody else well-known there as well. I can't remember, but I at least remember him. And just thinking, fuck, we all start somewhere, don't we? Like, we all start at the same spot. Yeah. All start at the same spot.
And that little zeitgeist, that little community there, their particular little 1992 LA milieu of all of these bands that kind of took off from there. And I think it's LA. I hope it's LA. I just could be running my mouth now. But actually, on the topic of that performance from before, I actually do make it kind of a mission of mine to at least have good evening, how are you, thank you, and sometimes wear Caligula's horse from Australia in the local language, like kind of wherever you are. Because I feel like no matter where you are, people appreciate it. Like, you know, I would hate to be up there in a non-English speaking country and just be like, yeah, g'day. You know, I mean, people love Australians for that sort of stuff. But, you know, I feel like putting in the effort, like when we played Chile and Mexico and Lima, you know, I don't speak Spanish, but I had a friend who's a Colombian Australian, and he helped me translate like a little speech at the beginning. And it was a little bit, took me ages to kind of memorize it, but giving that at the beginning really set the tone. You know, there was like, we were giving back for that, because you're so right. My two cities, I think, that were the easiest and best in the world in terms of audience were Santiago and Mexico City. Like the amount of love. It's like the opposite of Australia, where they are so unafraid to express the emotion of their care for you. Like they wear their hearts on their sleeve. And I think they appreciate music that does that too. Like, so for example, one of our songs like Firelight, for example, from Bloom, is a really soft kind of ballady, emotional thing. And it doesn't really hit when we play it in Australia. Like, it doesn't really land with Australian audiences because it's probably a little bit too candid with its, emotional openness. But you play that in Mexico and you got tears in the crowd, you got everyone singing along, I don't have to do anything, just throw the mic out to the crowd, and they're a really receptive, lovely, warm kind of crowd over there. So, like speaking a little bit of Spanish totally seals the deal, but they are definitely the most fun, kind of energetic and easy crowds in the world.
It's amazing.
In my opinion.
Oh, I think a lot of people who've done the same would probably agree. I mean, it's definitely a bucket list area for me. Just to get that experience at least once in my life, where I think you can just, I don't know if you felt this when you were doing it, but sort of almost like a weight off your shoulders, where you can also be candid. You can let your guard down and be yourself and not have to worry about, the guy standing 10 feet from the stage with his arms crossed, scowling you throughout the set, and you're thinking, what's that guy's problem? Does he not like our music, or is he just having a bad day? You're just looking out into this mass of people who, as you said before, are just, pouring out the love because they really just appreciate you being there. And I think also just the Spanish, doing the Spanish at the start, I mean, sealing the deal, like just, winning them over straight away. It's like, I've got you now. Let's have some fun.
Let's work together on this. Yeah. There was a dude in Chile that whole show was sort of cartoonish in a way for me, in a good way, because, still jet lagged. It was the first show on the tour. We were being really well taken care of by the promoters, more than we usually expect. In terms of being, catered for and being put up in hotels and all of that stuff. We're used to doing it really dirty. So that was amazing. And then we show up at this venue, which is called Blondie. And walking up onto that stage, it was just, I was expecting to play tin cans, for our first shows in this area. And it's a big theater, it's like, big open space, really large stage, great production. It was just kind of a shock to the system. And then when you get up on that stage and the crowd is there and just the sheer wall of noise that you get back just for stepping onto the stage, it was incredible. And about 3/4 of the way through the show, I looked down to my left, and right in front of, between sort of Sam and Dale, there was this priest in the full getup, like the white collar and everything, moshing with a couple of other dudes, like arms around each other, going absolutely ham in the mosh pit. And that was a moment of just look inside yourself, and you have a little moment of I'm doing this. This is real. This is an actual moment. And I met the guy afterwards, dude named Father Jorge, and he was so sweet and a really lovely dude. Loved him his Jesus, but he also loved him his metal, and that was really nice.
How surreal. What a surreal moment. I mean, I look for those things in life in general, and, lucky enough like yourself to have some of these moments, when you're performing and you get to meet lots of different people or just see people react to what you do. But those moments where time just stops for a moment, and you sort of you just look at the situation, you're almost like floating above the setting that you're in, and just sort of going, this is happening. Like this is happening right now, and I'm a part of it. And I don't think a lot of us get those moments too often. And so even just listening to you say it, I can imagine or begin to imagine sort of, the feelings that you'd probably have just looking out, just going, really? Wow. Okay. This is happening. And look where we are. Look at what's happening around me.
Yeah, we try to, even before all of this that stopped us touring and stuff, we tried not to take it for granted and kind of go, like, vocalize every time we were over in Europe or somewhere, like the first time in Latin America, United States, all of this stuff, and try to say out loud, like, man, music brought us here. Like, we spent all of our lives just creating music just because it was what we do and what we need to do to kind of function. And on the back of that, we're here doing this thing and just trying to really accept how insane it is and how grateful that we were for that. Because I think it's important, to kind of acknowledge how absurd it is, particularly writing music that's, music for music's sake, like art for art's sake kind of stuff. We're not trying to write pop music or try to make it or whatever. This is just sort of artistry that we have, and then performing that and then being able to do it so far from home and be so welcome. It's just nuts, absolutely nuts.
You've come a long way from the Milton bowling alley or even my backyard. You know.
Holy shit! I remember that now. God, I think I was like, that was the kind of tie-dye singlet era, white boy dreadlocks level gym, if I recall.
That's right. You worked the crowd well that day as well. So there you go.
The crowd, such as it was, the Aussie barbecue level. Yeah, that's freaking nuts. I think the only other time that people get an experience like that kind of like out of body thing, I got this piece of advice from, again, to sort of circle back to the beginning, from a dude that I went to school with on social media, and this is something like 8 years ago now, Jesus Christ, right before my wedding, and he'd obviously seen that I was going to get married and whatever. And he sent me this message saying, during the ceremony, it's going to go faster than you think. It'll be like lightning. You'll be up there thinking that it's going to be this moment, and it'll just be over, and you'll be signing the papers. So just for a moment, while you're up there, try to be there and like actively think, I'm here in this moment, I'm doing this thing. And I was so grateful for him for that, because it did go, and I did have that moment. I have a really strong memory of standing there and watching my wife walk down the aisle, because I deliberately went, I'm here, I'm watching this, I'm experiencing this, and I don't remember the rest. You know, it went so fast. So I'm really grateful he did that, and I've carried that with me in terms of performance now, because of those out-of-body experiences are when, you know, you're on stage, everything's electric, you're running off adrenaline, you're kind of giving the performance and thinking about a million miles an hour to try and make it happen, and then it's kind of over. But at special moments like that, like me seeing Father Jorge, or taking that moment at B-Prog, my friend, to kind of just take in the sight of what I'm witnessing, what I'm doing, that's a deliberate act. You say, I'm here, I'm witnessing this, I'm watching this, and that's the memory that sticks. You know, you can do all of this amazing stuff and forget it all unless you actively put yourself there. So I think it's a really important piece of advice.
Deliberate acts. Okay, I'm going to have to think about that today. I'm going to go and sit somewhere and be deliberate. Take it all in.
Just be present for a split second. Yeah. I know it's pretty corny. Like it's almost something that you would see on like I don't know, like one of those platitude memes shared by estranged family members that are kind of like on the hippier end of things. It's like, thanks, Aunt X. But at the same,
it's at the same time,
it is kind of yeah. See, that's too real. I think that's going to relate to a lot of people.
Yeah, well.
Thanks social media. But yeah, no, it's real. It is one of those things. If you take a second to just step outside your body and go like, yep, I'm doing this thing. I mean, whatever it is, most of the people listening here aren't going to be in bands or touring or performing or anything like that. But I think you can apply it to a whole bunch of stuff in life.
Well, it's probably more important now than over the last 12 months than ever before. I think as, you know, you turn your phone on, or you probably never turn your phone, it's always on, but, you know, you open up your apps, your social media apps, and straight away you're taken away. You're getting your attention's being stolen. And you know, a lot of it's not good. You know, fuck, the United States on its own is taking away most of people's energy globally at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, just to stay sane and not get swept up in the noise or the fear or the worry or the crazy theories or the debates or anything like that. It's just I think it's more important than ever for people to sit back and go, okay, let's actually assess ourselves right now. What's the health check look like? You know, am I alive? Yep. Okay, that's a good starting point. You know, how's my work, or where am I living, and things like that. And most things there might be certain things that might not be great, but I think what we tend to find is that the things that we stress about and overwhelm us are nowhere near as bad as the realities. And I think if we can stop and sort of go, actually, things are okay. They might not be great, but they're okay. And we can keep moving and keep improving and getting better. And so, yeah, a little bit of that, the old mindfulness can go a long way.
I think it's a funny thing, because you mentioned before turning 30, and everyone sort of, when you have that experience and the kind of mild to severe scale of crisis that comes with that, depending on where you're at. It's like my change in thinking, and it was a definitive change as I turned 30. So I'm not just going with the kind of mythos of, oh no. But I obviously went through a rough patch of kind of like, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm 30, I didn't see this coming. But then sort of noticing that I'm not pursuing my empire anymore. You know what I mean? It's like there's this thing, like a myth that you tell yourself in your 20s, that you have to be hustling and pushing for something and building your empire and having this thing that has your name on it, et cetera, et cetera. But being 30, it might just be because, you know, we've been moderately successful in what we do. But like being 30 and being at that point, we're just kind of like, you know what, I am actually pretty happy with where I'm at and what I've achieved. I don't really need to be focusing on the next big thing. I could be content with where I am right now, and I'm happy with what I've achieved. And it kind of helps you focus on family a little bit as well. Yeah. Focus on family, focus on the smaller things, focus on things that you actually enjoy. And it really did slow me down a bit, in a good way. I know that sounds bad, but it definitely did sort of slow the pace of my constant need for growth and building and stuff. And I look back on my 20s, particularly before I had a kid, and kind of going, what was my life before that? Like, what was my purpose? I can't imagine a life without my daughter in it, kind of thing. So it definitely changed me for the focus of my life and kind of what motivates me, I think.
So maybe eggs aren't all in one basket. Maybe they are diversified. They are in a few different areas, and you're probably in a better position than you sometimes think. You know, especially with what's been happening over the past 12 months. I mean, look, obviously really tough, and it's challenging, and it's forcing you to have to sort of think things through that you probably would rather not have to think about. But you know, at least you know there are certain things that you've already invested in. You've taken the time to build things that matter to you, like a family and a life and all this other stuff where you've got that balance. It is there, but it's just a case of always, you know, having to remember that and sort of recalibrate and go, okay, that's right. Yep, it's okay. We're cool. We can have our moments of crisis and semi breakdowns along the way, because that's life.
Oh, there will be those. I can't wait for my crises. They're going to be many and varied.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ditto. But yeah, I think overall, I don't know. I'm speaking on behalf of you now, no, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I think life's good overall. I think things can always be worse, and I think, you know, the challenges and the shit that you do have to deal with, I think, you know, it's just a part of life, and sometimes it just seems a little bit more extraordinary than what we're used to or what we expect. But you know, we keep chugging away.
And it's like it's asking myself the question, you know, with this self-identity thing, like, am I hurt as much by the actual reality of potentially losing this performance part of my life, this touring part of my life, or am I more upset from a sort of the narcissistic point of view of, you know, my need to be loved? You know, like, would I be perfectly content from now on, you know, if everything fell away and I was just like a dad for the rest of my life? Would I be perfectly content with that? And I think given time, I absolutely could be past like a mourning phase, right? You'd be upset about the loss of this thing, but I think a lot of it is just tied up with my need to be loved and to be out there, and my kind of ADD elements of like, just let me do stuff, you know. And, you know, you'd find other things to do and other ways to identify. And I think it's a positive journey in the end, ultimately. But it's, but it's just those transition phases of like asking yourself, like, who am I now? Like, what represents me now?
Yep, definitely. So before we wrap it up, now tell me if I'm wrong, but is this year the 10th anniversary of the band?
You know, it actually is. Thank you for the reminder.
Am I giving you extra work? Have you got plans?
Well, I mean, if we can tour, we'll tour. I think it's more, you know, maybe revisiting some sort of, I don't know, older sort of, you know, footage and stuff from the vault, and kind of sharing that with people, and trying to stay, you know, active on producing content, sort of social media and stuff, and kind of getting all of that out there so that, you know, we don't just disappear from people. But you know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to keep rebuilding my voice so that whenever we actually do get back to it, it'd be great. But 10 years is an absurd milestone to think about.
A decade, mate. It's a long time. It's a long time, but it's not at the same time. So
yeah,
it's just a weird weird sort of thing to go through and think, okay, well, what can happen in a 10-year span? I always think about my childhood and go, 10 years is a lifetime, but these days, 10 years can be a blink of an eye.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, like, I'm extremely happy with what we've achieved, like multiple world tours and world tours, international tours, and 5 hours in that 10 years. It's like we've done some real shit. Actually, it's funny. Adrian, our guitarist, has this little thing, and I don't know whether this is a unique Adrian thing or whether he picked it up from somewhere. But it was a really interesting way of thinking where you're walking around in your regular life, and someone's being kind of a dick, or you don't feel appreciated or whatever. Using what he called bottled applause. Where it's just like you've got these little memories of like no, it's a reminder of like I've been appreciated, I've done some real shit. My version of that is just thinking to myself, no, I've done some real shit. My life might be small right now. I've had experiences around the world that very few people have even touched. So it's kind of across that 10 years, there's been a lot of love, a lot of suffering, a lot of fun. So I'm not looking back on it thinking, oh, we've missed out on anything or I missed my shot. It's just like, yeah, we've done 10 years of good stuff.
Bottled applause, I like that.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Might use it myself. Just a little bit of
yeah. Go ahead.
Bring you back to earth and go. Yep, everything's okay.
Everything's fine.
All right, go and grab Seahorse's latest album, Rise Radiant, that came out last year in 2020. Of course, go to CALIGULA'S.com. They're on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the streaming services, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. I'll have those links. I'll have Jim's social media handles in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. And of course, whatever you're listening to this through right now, there'll be a bunch of clickable links as well. So make sure you click through and check out Jim and Co's world. And please reach out to Jim and everybody that's been on the podcast for the past 5.5 years, 200 plus guests, lots of amazing people, lots of great stories, amazing insights, nuggets of wisdom. And I'm sure that people that were on the podcast 3, 4, 5 years ago would be absolutely stoked to get messages from people listening to the episodes now. So make sure you dig into the back cat. There's some great stuff there. And I'd love for people to continue to listen to those old episodes because there's some really good stuff there. Now, before we wrap it up, I should say, if I can speak English, patreon.com/Andy Dowling, the best way to support this podcast. I've got a new t-shirt design that's going to be unleashed very, very soon. Brace yourselves for this one. If anybody's been paying attention, we did Team Chronoplan last year. I'm going to do Team Chronoplan again sometime this year, but in the interim, I've got a different type of t-shirt design that's coming soon. Pretty cool. I've got Tristan Tait working on that for me at the moment, but I'm going to unleash that to the Patreon community first dibs there, and then whatever leftovers, whatever dribs and drabs will be unleashed to the rest of you common folk that haven't jumped onto Patreon just yet. So if you want first dibs on that, also get access to the exclusive Patreon podcast episode that comes out every Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Definitely get over to patreon.com/Andy Dowling. It is the best way to support this podcast. You can just, even if you just want to give a little tip of the hat and just do $1 a month, and it's just a set and forget, you don't even have to worry about it. That'd be amazing. And of course, any additional support you want to give will be just incredible for me. So it's the reason why Andy Social exists in 2021. If I can even get the year right, 2021. It's the reason why there's 2 episodes a week, and it's just pure fuel and motivation for me to keep doing this podcast. So thank you so much to all the people that have jumped onto Patreon so far, and I hope to see more of you over there soon, welcoming you with open arms. But a little shout out, a little thank you to my top tier, $10 and $20 tier folks. These are the heavy hitters. These are the guys who just, man, like just throwing coin at me, backing your boy Andy, and investing in the longevity of this podcast. So these people are absolutely amazing, as with everybody that's already on Patreon. But these people in particular, thank you very much to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, we've got Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, and we've got Christian from Canberra as well. Thank you very much, folks. If you have joined in the past couple of weeks, rest assured that your name will eventually be called out in the podcast, and definitely on the Patreon podcast every week as well. But thank you so much to everybody that's been supporting on Patreon. It's amazing. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. I'm sure you guys have got it drilled into your heads by now, but that is absolutely huge. Now, one final thing before we wrap it up. A couple of additional call to actions, which I'm going to get into the habit of talking about a little bit more. I think this is one thing I've let myself down. please, if throwing money my way is not your thing for whatever reason, and that's totally cool, the best ways to support this podcast is, of course, listening, which is what you're doing right now. So bare minimum, thank you so much for still tuning in and not ending the podcast too early while I'm waffling on at the end of this particular episode. But of course, getting out there and subscribing to Apple Podcasts or following on Spotify or whatever the equivalent is on your podcast player. Making sure that you share the episodes if you find an episode that you really enjoy. Reaching out to the guests who've been on the podcast episode and letting them know what you thought of the episode if you enjoyed it. A little bit of social media love. I don't expect people to be doing high activity on comments and tagging and all that sort of stuff, but even just one little thumbs up or one little love heart on the social media posts go a hell of a long way. Also, if you're able to leave a review anywhere on the internet, whether it be Apple Podcasts, even on the Facebook page or wherever else, that stuff all helps as well. So those little things, those little clicks of the button of your mouse or a tap on your phone can go a hell of a long way to support this podcast. So consider those things this year. I've got a lot of goals to ramp this up. Obviously, there's more episodes coming. There's some fantastic guests coming. I've got some download goals. I've got some subscriber goals. I've got some Patreon goals. There's just a lot of stuff happening this year. I'm really, really excited and can't do any of this without you. So thank you so much for all the support that you guys have been giving over the past 5 years. Enough from me. Enough crapping on. Next week's episode, later this week's episode, is a return guest. A guest who was on a previous episode of the podcast, maybe was on the previous 2 episodes of the podcast. An epic chat in the past, and we managed to rein it in a little bit. So that will probably reduce down the options and probably give you a good enough hint to work out who that is. So stay tuned. In a couple of days' time, that one will be out, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So until then, take care, folks, and ta-ta!